The worst part wasn't the secret, the worst part was that I almost didn't go back for it. I had been standing on the platform at Union Station for 11 minutes, watching my train fill up, when I realized my laptop charger was still sitting on the kitchen counter. Not just any charger, the only one compatible with my work laptop, the one I needed for the 3-day conference in Charleston. My boss had already sent 2 reminder emails about the presentation I was supposed to lead on Friday morning. Without that charger, I'd be borrowing one from a stranger or presenting on 10% battery and a prayer. So I grabbed my rolling carry-on, apologized my way past 4 people in the boarding line, and took an Uber back to the house. The whole ride home, I was annoyed at myself. 31 years old, and I still left the house like a college student running late for an 8 a.m. class. My husband had always teased me about it. "Claire, you'd forget your own head," and I used to laugh, because it was true, and because back then, when he teased me, it felt like affection. I didn't call him to say I was coming back. It was 11:15 on a Tuesday morning. He worked from home on Tuesdays. I figured I'd slip in through the garage, grab the charger off the counter, maybe kiss him on the top of his head if he was deep in a spreadsheet, and be back at the station in time for the noon train. That was the plan. The Uber pulled up to the house at 11:22. I remember the time because I checked it when I got out, calculating whether I still had a comfortable margin. The garage door opened with my code, the way it always did. His car was in the driveway. The kitchen light was on. Everything looked exactly the way it always looked on a Tuesday morning in our house in Marietta, Georgia, ordinary, quiet, familiar. I walked in through the laundry room and set my carry-on next to the dryer. The charger was right where I'd left it, coiled beside the Keurig. I picked it up and was about to stuff it in my bag when I heard his voice coming from the living room. Not a work call. I knew what his work calls sounded like, clipped, professional, full of phrases like, "circle back," and "let's take that offline." This was different. This was warm, loose. The voice he used when he was relaxed. I don't know why I didn't announce myself right then. Something made me go still. Some quiet animal instinct that I didn't have a name for yet. "She has no idea," he said. "She's already on her way to Charleston. We have 3 whole days." I stood in the laundry room holding a laptop charger and stopped breathing. I know. Stop worrying. Claire, as you know how she is, totally checked out. She's been obsessed with this conference for weeks. Honestly, it's the most passion I've seen from her about anything in a long time. He laughed. I had heard my husband laugh thousands of times. I knew every version of it, the polite laugh for his mother's jokes, the genuine laugh that made his eyes crinkle, the uncomfortable laugh he used when someone said something awkward at a dinner party. This was none of those. This was the laugh of a man who was completely comfortable, completely safe, in a world that did not include me. "She won't be back until Friday night. We have time, just come over." A pause. "I told you, she doesn't pay attention. She never has. I could probably have you over for dinner and she'd just think you were a coworker." I set the charger down very quietly, on top of the dryer. I want to tell you that I felt rage first. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? A clean hot anger, something that propels you into action, something useful. But that's not what happened. What happened was a strange and total stillness, like the moment after a car accident when you're sitting in the wreckage, trying to understand what your body is doing and whether any of the sensations you feel are pain or just shock. I had been with my husband for 6 years, married for 3. We had met at a work happy hour in 2019, and I had thought he was the most confident man I'd ever been around, not arrogant, just settled. Comfortable in himself. I had found that quality magnetic because I was 25 and still figuring out who I was, and he seemed to already know. I thought about all of it standing there in my own laundry room, listening to him wind down the call. "Okay. Give me an hour to shower. Come around noon." The call ended. I heard him set his phone down on the coffee table. I heard him stretch that familiar grunt he made when he got up from the couch. I heard his footsteps move toward the hallway bathroom. The shower turned on. I stood there for another 30 seconds. Maybe a minute. I'm not entirely sure. Then I picked up the charger, picked up my bag, and walked back out through the garage. I did not slam the door. I did not leave a note. I did not call him from the driveway or stand in the middle of the kitchen and wait for him to come out so that I could see his face fall. I thought about all of those things. I ran through them very quickly, the way you scroll through a menu when you already know what you want, and then I walked out. The Uber driver who picked me up was a quiet man named Gerald who was listening to a gospel station at low volume. I sat in the back seat and watched the neighborhoods of Marietta go by and thought about the conference in Charleston and whether I still wanted to go, and whether the presentation I'd been preparing for 3 weeks still felt like something that mattered. And the answer to both questions turned out to be yes. I went to Charleston. I gave the presentation. I did not call my husband for the first day. He texted me twice, "Hope the trip is going well," and "Later, miss you already," and I read both messages the way you read a piece of paper you've found on the street, with detached curiosity, wondering about the person who wrote it. On the second day, I called my sister. My sister Renee is 4 years older than me and works as a family law paralegal in Atlanta, which meant that this was either the worst possible person to tell or exactly the right one. I called her from my hotel room at 9 o'clock at night with a glass of wine and the lights of the Charleston waterfront spread out below me, and I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. "You didn't confront him." "No. You just left." "I had a train to catch." Another pause. Then, "Claire, I know. Do you want to tell me what you're actually feeling right now, or are we still in the phase where we're being very calm and reasonable?" I looked out at the water. The thing about growing up landlocked in Atlanta is that you never quite get over the ocean. Every time I saw it, I had this involuntary sense of scale, a reminder that there are things much larger than whatever is happening in your particular life at this particular moment. "I think I already knew," I said. "Not the specifics, but something. For a while." "How long is a while?" "Maybe a year." Renee exhaled slowly. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to finish the conference. You're going to give that presentation and you're going to be brilliant, because you are. And when you get back, you're not going to walk in that door until you've talked to someone in my office. Do you understand me? I'm not going to do anything dramatic." "I know you're not." "That's exactly what worries me." "Claire, dramatic would at least mean you're reacting. What you're doing right now is the thing you always do, which is absorb and process and function and not let anyone see." She wasn't wrong. I had been doing it my whole life. I was the composed one in the family. The one who didn't cry at funerals, not because I didn't feel it, but because my grief was always something I kept in a separate room and visited privately. "I'll call your office Thursday," I said. "Tonight," she said. "I'm texting you the name right now." I met with a family law attorney named Patricia Howe on Thursday afternoon in her office on Meeting Street, which felt like an almost absurdly poetic address for the circumstances. She was 60, direct, and had a small framed quote on her wall that said, "Prior preparation prevents poor performance," which I appreciated. I told her what I'd heard. I told her about the marriage, the 3 years, the 6 years before that. I told her about the house in Marietta, which we'd bought together 18 months ago and which had both our names on the mortgage. Patricia took careful notes and asked clear questions, and at the end of 45 minutes she looked at me over her glasses and said, "You came in prepared." "Most people come in pieces." "I had 3 days to think," I said. "That gave you a significant advantage." I flew home Friday evening. My husband picked me up from the airport. He had flowers, a mixed bouquet from the Kroger near our house, slightly wilted, the kind of flowers a person grabs as an afterthought. He hugged me at baggage claim and said he'd missed me, and he seemed normal, easy, unbothered. Either he had no idea that anything had shifted, or he was a better actor than I'd given him credit for. I hugged him back. I put the flowers on the back seat. I talked about the conference on the drive home, the sessions I'd attended, a funny thing that happened at the networking dinner, the way the city smelled after it rained. He nodded and asked follow-up questions and laughed in the right places. That night, I lay in bed next to him and stared at the ceiling and felt something I didn't expect. Clarity. Not peace exactly, but the clean feeling of knowing what was true. There's an exhaustion that comes from suspecting something without being able to name it, a low-grade constant drain that you don't even notice until it's gone. I hadn't realized how long I'd been carrying that weight until I wasn't carrying it anymore. The next 3 weeks were ordinary on the surface. I went to work. I came home. I made dinner twice a week, which was our long-standing arrangement. I watched television with my husband on Sunday nights. I was present and functional and, I think, unremarkable. I was also talking to Patricia Howe twice a week, building a complete picture of our financial situation, locating accounts, understanding the mortgage, reviewing what we had come in with and what had accumulated jointly. Renee had connected me with a forensic accountant she worked with, a quiet woman named Susan who had a gift for finding things that had been put somewhere inconvenient. What Susan found was not what I expected. My husband had, over the course of the previous 14 months, been moving money. Not large amounts at once, nothing that would have triggered a joint account alert. Small transfers, consistent, from a savings account we both contributed to into something I had no visibility into. It totaled, by Susan's estimate, just over $40,000. I sat with that number for a long time. This wasn't a man who had fallen into something. This was a man who had been planning. Quietly, patiently, in the small hours of what looked from the outside like a normal marriage. She has no idea. I thought about that sentence every day. The ease of it. The confidence. The slight contempt embedded in it, the way you'd talk about a sleeping dog fond, maybe, but fundamentally dismissive. She doesn't pay attention. She never has. Here is what I know about myself. I am not a dramatic person. I don't flip tables or throw phones or deliver speeches in parking lots. I never have been, and I don't intend to start. But I am also, and this took me a long time to understand about myself, not someone who stays somewhere she doesn't belong just because leaving requires effort. I signed the first paperwork on a Tuesday morning. 3 weeks after I'd walked back into my house for a laptop charger and walked out again with something I hadn't gone in looking for. I didn't tell my husband I was filing. I had Patricia send the papers to his office, which she assured me was entirely standard. I was at work when it happened. I know, because he called me at 2:47 inches the afternoon, and I looked at my phone and let it ring, and then let the voicemail fill, and then sat for a moment at my desk and took a breath before I went back to the quarterly report I'd been working on. He called 3 more times before 5 o'clock. I called him back from the parking garage because I wanted the privacy. "What is this?" he said. Not a question. The voice of a man who was surprised, which told me that he had genuinely believed his own assessment of me, that I didn't pay attention, that I was checked out, that I would not see what was right in front of me. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "Claire, we need to talk about this. You can't just, there's a process, there are things we need to." "There is a process," I said. "Patricia Howe is managing it. You'll want to get your own attorney." "Who is Patricia Howe? How long have you been? When did you?" "I'll be staying at Renee's for a while. I've already moved what I need. The rest we can sort through the attorneys." A silence. "I don't understand," he said. "I don't understand what happened." I thought about the platform at Union Station. The 11 minutes I stood there before I realized I'd forgotten the charger. The Uber ride back to the house, me checking the time, calculating my margin. "I came home for my charger," I said. "You should have answered the door." I hung up. I want to be honest about what the weeks after that looked like, because I think people sometimes expect a clean landing, the papers signed, the chapter closed, the protagonist walking into the light with her life neatly reset. That's not how it works. There were nights at Renee's apartment when I cried in a way that surprised me with its violence, the kind of crying that comes, not from sadness, exactly, but from the body finally releasing something it's been holding at tension. There were mornings I woke up and forgot, for a single sweet second, and then remembered. There was the particular loneliness of going through a thing and not being able to fully explain it to the people who loved me, because the thing I was grieving wasn't just the marriage, but the version of myself who had believed in it. There was also, slowly, something else. I started running again. I had run in college and stopped somewhere in the middle of my relationship, the way you let things go when you're building a life with someone and there never seems to be enough morning. I started going out at 6 a.m., just 30 minutes, just to feel my body doing something it chose. I started calling my college roommate Darla again, who lived in Portland and who had always been the person I called when things wwere real. She drove down to Atlanta in April with a bottle of Willamette Valley Pinot, and we sat on Renee's balcony and talked until 2 in the morning, and at some point she said, "You seem lighter." And I thought about that for days afterward. I was lighter. That was true. I hadn't expected it to be true, but it was. The divorce was finalized in September. It was not contentious, which surprised the attorneys, and maybe shouldn't have surprised me. Once everything was visible, the accounts, the transfers, the full picture, there wasn't much for him to stand on. He kept his car and the furniture he cared about. I kept the equity we'd built in the house, which we sold, and which gave me enough for a down payment on a small place in Decatur with a yard I had no idea what to do with yet. The day I signed the final papers, I went to lunch by myself at a place on Ponce de Leon that I had always wanted to try and never had because my husband didn't like that kind of food. I sat at a table by the window and ordered something I couldn't fully pronounce and watched the street outside and felt, in a way that was quiet and not dramatic, like myself. Not a new self. Not a transformed self. Just myself. The version that had been waiting patiently in the back of the room while other things were happening. My mother called me that evening to check in, the way she'd been calling every few weeks since everything started. She asked how I was doing, and I told her I was good, and she asked in the careful way mothers ask when they want to believe the answer but are prepared not to. "Are you really?" "Yeah," I said. "I actually am." She was quiet for a moment, then, "You know what I keep thinking about? You went back for a charger." "I know. Of all the things. A charger." "I almost didn't go back for it," I said. "I almost just bought a new one at the airport." My mother laughed a real laugh, the kind that comes with relief. "Well," she said, "I'm glad you didn't. Here is the thing I've thought about most in the month since. Not what he said, not the money, not the person he called, none of that is what stays with me. What stays with me is the 30 seconds I stood in my own laundry room, charger in my hand, deciding whether to walk in or walk out. I didn't go in because I froze. I didn't go in because I was afraid. I didn't go in because some part of me, the part that had been quietly paying attention for longer than I'd admitted, understood that whatever came next would require stillness, not fire. That the most powerful thing I could do in that moment was to leave with what I came for and then take the time to think. She has no idea. He was right, actually just not in the way he meant it. I had no idea how steady I was until I was tested. No idea how clearly I could think when the noise settled. No idea how much I had been accommodating, bending, making space for someone who had long since stopped making space for me. I have an idea now. My yard in Decatur is still mostly dirt and ambition, but I planted some things in October that the woman at the nursery promised me would come up in spring. I don't know enough about gardening yet to have any confidence in that promise, but I bought the bulbs anyway. I figured if there was ever a time to bet on things that grow slowly and come back on their own, it was probably now. Renee came over last weekend and we sat on the back steps in the late afternoon sun, and she asked what I was going to do next with the house, with work, with everything, and I told her I wasn't sure yet, and that for the first time in a long time, not being sure felt like possibility instead of failure. She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she used to when we were kids, and said, "You know what the worst part is? You're going to be annoyingly okay." I laughed. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." The light was doing something beautiful across the yard, falling gold and long through the neighbor's oak tree, and I sat there in it and didn't move, and didn't feel the need to, and thought that whatever came up from the ground in spring, I was ready to watch it grow.